The stage lights burned hot, but the room suddenly went cold. Millions were watching the live broadcast. It was a special U.S. political panel hosted in Washington, D.C., meant to foster global dialogue. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the rising leader from Burkina Faso, sat among us commentators and foreign policy experts, and then it happened. Kash Patel leaned forward, his voice sharp like broken glass. "Why is he even here?" he sneered. "Go back to the zoo," gasps, "real ones, the kind that echo when something sacred is violated." The studio froze. The camera didn't cut. There was no delay. You could see a woman in the audience cover her mouth. One of the panelists blinked in disbelief. An intern dropped her clipboard, but Traoré didn't flinch. He sat there silent, unshaken. He looked directly at Patel, his eyes full of something more powerful than anger. It was dignity. The host tried to recover. Let's stay respectful, but the damage was done. Twitter exploded. Cancel Kash began trending. News outlets cut in with live coverage. The world was watching, and Ibrahim Traoré had not said a word yet, but when he finally did, it changed everything. Everyone expected an outburst. Some expected him to walk off, a few expected a fight, but Traoré just leaned in and did nothing. For a long, uncomfortable moment, he held the room with complete silence. He didn't even blink. Then calmly, like a man who had seen war and knew what battles were worth fighting, he began to speak. "Mr. Patel," he said slowly, "where I come from, we were taught not to confuse noise with strength." The words hit harder than a shout. Even the host sat up straighter. "You call me an animal," Traoré continued, voice firm, "but you forget some animals protect their people, some fight for survival, some lead with instinct and courage. I would rather be one of them than a man who hides behind microphones and insults." A stunned hush fell over the audience. You could see Patel shrinking, not physically, but emotionally. The weight of his own words began to press on him like gravity. Somewhere in the audience, a tear rolled down a woman's cheek. This wasn't just about race or politics anymore. This was something deeper, something human. Traoré's voice softened, but it didn't shake. "You say zoo," he said. "Let me tell you about my home." He leaned forward. "In my village, children walk 5 miles for water. They wash their mother's hands before they eat. They learn history not from books, but from scars left on their fathers." The studio grew quieter. "I come from a place where we don't throw away old people. We sit at their feet and learn where war left our soil dry, but our hearts stayed wet with hope." The camera caught Patel looking down, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. "So when you say zoo, I hear fear, because you don't understand us. You've only watched us from cages of comfort and media." Traoré paused again, but I broke out of mine. The audience erupted, not in claps, but in emotion. Some gasped, some cried, even the sound engineer had to wipe his eyes. Social media began slicing the clip, resharing every word. "Let me tell you about my village" became a viral quote, but Traoré wasn't done. His calmness was building into something deeper. He hadn't even told them the real story yet. The studio was dead silent, not because the camera stopped rolling, but because shame had entered the room. Kash Patel sat still like a man, realizing he had crossed a line. The world saw in real time, but the cameras didn't flinch, and neither did Traoré. Ibrahim Traoré turned to the moderator. "You invited me here to talk about truth," he said. "Let me tell you one." His voice was steady, but behind it lived generations of pain, strength, and survival. The audience was frozen, as if each word pressed against their chest, like weight in 2018. Traoré began, "I lost a friend in a village raid. We buried him with our bare hands. There were no headlines, no outcry, but still we carried on." You could see people in the audience lower their heads. "That friend taught me something: never respond to ignorance with anger. It only feeds the fire." Somewhere backstage, a producer whispered, "We have to clip this now. This is going viral." But for Traoré, this wasn't a performance, it was the truth. And truth, when delivered calmly, can cut deeper than hate. Traoré turned slightly in his chair and looked directly into the camera, not at Kash, not at the host, but at the people watching. "From their homes when I was 8, he said softly, "I walked 5 miles to school without shoes. I didn't cry because my mother said strong legs carry broken roads. The studio's oxygen felt heavy. Even the lighting seemed dimmer. I learned to read under a mango tree because our school had no roof. My teacher had only 2 books, one for math, one for courage," he said. "Learn both, you'll need them." The moderator's eyes began to glass over. "So when I hear 'go back to the zoo,' I remember my teacher, and I think I've come far enough." Someone in the audience gasped. You could hear a single clap from the back, soft and respectful. Kash Patel looked away suddenly, fiddling with his microphone wire, but Traoré wasn't trying to humiliate him. He wasn't trying to win a debate. He was telling the story of a boy who had nothing yet somehow became a leader. And people watching across the world felt that Traoré paused his voice. Trembled not from fear, but from memory the day. I left home for military service, he said. My mother pulled me aside. She gave me a small folded cloth. Inside was a note. He reached into his jacket pocket and slowly unfolded a piece of paper, faded, creased, but very real. This is it, he said, holding it for the camera. She wrote, be the shield, not the sword. Speak before you fight, pray before you speak. The studio's silence became sacred. I carry it every day, Trop, added his voice, thick with emotion. Not for protection, but as a reminder. You could hear sniffles from the audience. A woman in the second row dabbed her eyes, even the cameraman's lens trembled slightly. Tro looked at Kash Patel, not with anger, but something more painful. You insulted me, he said, but you didn't break me. You reminded me why. I fight not for power, but for the children still walking to school without shoes. A single tear slipped down his cheek, and that image, that one moment, would break the internet. In the next hour, the studio remained still, the silence growing heavier with every passing second. The audience was waiting, some holding their breath, others whispering to themselves, what will Trop say next? Tress's eyes didn't waver from Kash Patel, but instead of anger, there was something else, something almost like sorrow, a deep, quiet sadness that filled the room. You see, Traoré began softly. Sometimes the loudest voices in the room are the ones trying to hide their own fears. The host leaned forward, sensing the tension. I didn't come here to fight with anyone. I came here to build bridges. Where walls have stood too long, the camera caught Patel shifting uncomfortably, his face pale. Because the world, Traoré said, is not made better by insults or hate. It is made better by understanding. This simple, calm statement made the room hold their breath again. People watching at home were glued to their screens, tears already welling up. Traoré's voice grew firmer, but still steady. When I was a child, my grandmother told me stories of our ancestors, people who faced impossible odds, yet never lost hope. He paused, looking down briefly, as if remembering. She told me that words can either heal or wound. They carry the power to change the course of history. The audience was silent. Some had tears now, so when I hear words meant to degrade, I remember my grandmother's wisdom, and I choose to respond not with anger, but with strength. Patel's eyes darted around the room. He tried to interrupt, but Traoré raised a hand gently. This isn't about one person's insult, he said. It's about what we do next. Traoré's voice softened. We can either let words divide us, or we can let them remind us of our shared humanity. The studio lights dimmed slightly, as if mirroring the gravity of the moment. Trop leaned forward. I want everyone watching to understand something, he said. I am not just fighting for myself. I fight for every child in Burkina Faso who dreams of a better future. His eyes locked on Patel's. And if I must face insults or hate, I will do so with my head held high, because their dreams are stronger than any word. A wave of emotion swept through the studio. The host struggled to speak. Social media was already lighting up. Millions of viewers around the world felt moved. Some even cried. And Kash Patel, he sat frozen, his voice caught in his throat. This was no ordinary debate. This was a lesson in dignity, strength, and hope. After Traoré's powerful words, the studio air felt thick. Kash Patel sat frozen, unable to form a reply. Cameras lingered on his silence, a silence louder than any insult. Traoré didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. Instead, he let the pause speak volumes. Leaders, he said softly, carry more than titles. We carry the hopes of millions. He looked directly into the camera, eyes steady. When hate tries to break us, it is our silence and our dignity that become our strongest weapons. The moderator swallowed hard, sensing the historic weight in Traoré's tone. I could have answered with anger, but anger never built a nation. It only burns it down. Traoré's calm courage had cracked the facade of the debate. Viewers at home were glued to their screens, feeling the gravity of what just happened. This was more than a clash of words. It was a moment that showed what true leadership looks like. As the debate moved forward, Traoré shared a story, one that few knew in my country. He said, there are children whose laughter is the only thing that keeps hope alive. They don't care about politics, they care about a future. He paused, voice gentle. When I speak, I speak for them, for the ones whose voices are silenced by poverty and fear. Tears glistened in the eyes of some audience members. It's easy to throw words like, go back when you've never had to leave your home because of war. True S words cut deep. not with anger, but with compassion. I've seen mothers hold their babies tight, hoping for peace that never comes. The room was quiet, heavy with emotion. Viewers everywhere began sharing the story on social media. Traoré wasn't just a politician, he was a symbol of hope, and Kash Patel, his earlier insult now seemed small, meaningless in the face of such humanity. TR's closing remarks echoed like a heartbeat felt across continents. "We are not so different," he said softly. "Every person everywhere wants to live with dignity." He looked around the studio, eyes full of quiet fire. "When we attack each other with hate, we lose sight of our shared dreams." The audience was spellbound. "I stand here not to divide, but to remind us all compassion is the true power." As the debate ended, the studio lights dimmed slowly. Cameras zoomed in on Trops.com, face shining with determination on social media. Millions watched and shared clips, comments flooded with admiration, tears, and hope. This wasn't just a moment of silence after a brutal insult, it was a spark that could ignite change. Traoré's gaze softened for a moment as he spoke about the heavy burden he carried every day. "I wake knowing that the eyes of my country are upon me, not just to lead, but to protect their hopes, their dreams, even their lives." He took a breath, steady and calm. "It is a weight no one outside our world can truly understand, but it is a responsibility I bear with pride." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. When I heard those cruel words, "Go back to the zoo," I didn't hear just an insult, I heard the echoes of centuries of ignorance. Yet he said anger would have done nothing. So I chose silence at first to let the weight settle, then to speak not from rage, but from truth. Social media exploded with support. Millions saw not just a leader, but a man who carried his people's pain and dignity. Alike, the debate had started as a clash of ideologies, but it had evolved into something far greater. "This moment," Traoré said, "is not about politics, it's about humanity." He looked at Patel, not with hate, but with an invitation. We have to ask ourselves, what legacy do we want to leave? One of division or one of unity? The studio audience was moved to tears. "I came here to remind everyone that our differences don't define us, our compassion does." He spoke of families torn apart by war and poverty and the universal desire for peace. If we listen, truly listen, we can heal that night. The video clips went viral, not for the insult, but for Traoré's grace and strength in a world quick to anger. Traoré's final words in the debate shocked many. "I forgive those who spoke out of hate," he said gently. The room gasped, not because they deserve it, but because I choose freedom over bitterness. He explained how forgiveness was a weapon stronger than any insult. It frees the heart from chains. It allows us to move forward. The tears that fell from many eyes that night were tears of hope. "This is not weakness, it is courage." Kash Patel sat quietly speechless. Millions watching felt their hearts swell with admiration for Traoré's strength. This moment would be remembered not as a low point, but as a shining example of humanity's best. As the debate's final moments approached, the world held its breath. News outlets across the globe replayed Traoré's calm yet commanding response. The insult from Patel had sparked anger and shock, but Traoré's words had ignited something greater. Reflection. Viewers everywhere saw a man who chose dignity over division, wisdom over wrath. "This moment," Traoré said softly, "is a crossroads." He urged leaders to rise above hatred and embrace unity. Millions of messages flooded social media, people crying, sharing stories of their own struggles with prejudice and hope. Traoré wasn't just a leader from Burkina Faso anymore, he was a symbol for everyone who had ever faced hate and chosen compassion. Instead, the days after the debate, messages poured into Traoré from around the world, people inspired by his grace and strength. In Burkina Faso, children painted murals of their captains smiling with pride, and the U.S. citizens debated what true leadership meant. Kash Patel, meanwhile, retreated into silence. The weight of his words settled on him. Traoré's response wasn't just about winning a debate, it was about healing wounds. "I believe in a future where we lift each other up," he said in a heartfelt interview. His humility and courage struck a chord, breaking down walls between people on the final day of the debates. Aftermath. Traoré addressed the world one last time. He tries to divide us, but love, forgiveness, and understanding will always win. His voice, calm but full of fire, echoed through hearts everywhere. "Let us choose kindness. Let us build bridges." Tears flowed freely in many homes. This was not just a political moment, it was a human moment. As the screen faded to black, a message appeared in a world desperate for hope be the change? Like, subscribe, and share your story below. Let's spread compassion together. The story ended, but the impact had just begun.